Nazir Daf Samach Gimel Aleph and Amud Aleph and Amud Beis, facts and knowledge, Tumat Tehom. So consider the fact that there is a body of human knowledge. All the things that are known to humanity, that's a body of information. But there are facts that are outside that body. There are a whole lot of things that humanity doesn't yet know. So if you think of this huge body of facts, which is infinite in a way, and a subset of that, which is an enormous amount, but it's an amount that humanity knows. And information moves from one category to another. As we get to know more, so information moves from the body of facts into the body of human knowledge. And the body of human knowledge gets bigger and bigger. What happens if a person acts in a way which doesn't take account of a fact, but it's not human knowledge yet? So you might say, well, if it's not human knowledge, what difference does it make? So I'll give you an example. A person smokes cigarettes heavily at a time when it's not yet clear that this is disadvantageous to health. And then it becomes clear that this is unhealthy and it's dangerous and damaging to one's health. Does he have to do tshuva? Does he have to say, I was unaware, I was doing something which was wrong, but I didn't know it was wrong. The human knowledge, the fact is it was wrong. The facts haven't changed. Smoking didn't become less dangerous, but we didn't know it was so dangerous. It became less dangerous later on. And Rav Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva on that. On what do we say about Gedolei Yisrael who smoked even during the transition time when it started to be known that it wasn't healthy but it wasn't yet established. And Rav Moshe has an amazing approach where he says, if you do something about which there's no knowledge, then Shomer P'tayim Hashem protects the ignorant. If now that we know that smoking is dangerous, there's no siyata d'ishmaya, Hashem doesn't help. You smoke at your own risk. But before there was knowledge, the Rebbe Hashem protected people if they did it and they were the best of intentions, they just didn't know what they were doing. So there you've got an example of a halachic ramification of information which at one point is a fact, an unknown fact, and then becomes a known fact. I will go into this in some more detail on the sugya. This daf is an interesting daf. It's one of these many dafim that we've had in Nazir and we've had in other mesechtas and will have in other mesechtas, where you look at it and there's no chance of a matmon. It doesn't seem to be anything that's relevant to us. It doesn't seem anything that can give us new insights. And when that happens, what I do, and that's important for you as well, is there's a matmon on every line of Gemara. You've got to know that. You don't have to. The matmon doesn't have to be yelling at you. In fact, usually if the matmon is yelling at us, I don't use that. That's an obvious one. The idea is to take one that's why it's a matmon. It's hidden. You've got to search for it. Really in anything. So what I do in a situation like that is I say, okay, so on the stuff, what triggers my interest? Of what is intriguing to me? What do I want to learn? And then I just learn that. And as you learn it, things emerge. So what intrigued me on this stuff is the idea of Tumat Tehom, as opposed to Tumat Yudua. Tumat Tehom is a tumor which couldn't have been known by anybody. Nobody could have known that tumor was there. Tumor Yudua is tumor which people did know or could have known was there. And we'll see the examples of how that works. But this idea of Tumat Tehom, which literally means Tehumah from under the depths. It's like under the ocean. Some Rishonim say that at the time of the Mabul, the whole of humanity was wiped out. Where were their bodies? They're at the bottom of the ocean. So there's tumor down there, but we don't know where it is, so it's not relevant to us. We can't access it. That's Tumat Tehom. So I started looking in at the sugya of Tumat Tehom, which is what we'll look at the moment in order to understand it. So what we have we have a parallel sugya back in Psochim Daf Pei Beis. The Mishnah here, because this concept of Tumas Tehom applies to a Nazir and it applies to Korban Pesach. Those are the two places where it applies. What is this din? The din is a Nazir shegileach v'nodalo shu tameh. A Nazir finishes his period of Nazirut and he shaves and is about to bring his Korban. He brought his Korban, and then discovers that he actually became tameh a week ago. Im tuma yudua soter. If it's Tuma Yudua, that's a class of Tuma which was known about, he's got to start again. He undoes his nazirut. V'im tumat tehom, but if it is tumat tehom, ein soter, then he doesn't have to redo his whole nazirut. Im ad shelo gileach ben kach uven kach soter. If he discovers it before he was megalech, he's in the middle of his nazirut still, and he discovers last week he had tuma. Even if it was tumat tehom, he has to start counting again. So it's only in that period after he ends his nazirut, if he discovered he was exposed to tumat tehom, we don't do anything. There's no consequence for that. What is Ve'ezehu tumat tehom? The Gemara says on the next page, Kol she'ein makira echad b'sof ha'olam. Tuma which nobody knows about, even on the other side of the world. No human being knows about it. Makira echad b'sof ha'olam. If somebody somewhere in the world knows about it, ein zu tumat tehom. Then the Gemara gives example. V'lo amru tumat tehom ela lameit bilvad. This is only talking about a mate's sheretz and things like that. It doesn't apply to. It's a tumat ha'meit. It's a dead body. We have a similar Mishnah in Psochim where it talks about a person who brings his korban Pesach and then discovers the korban was tameh. So if it was tumat tehom, it doesn't matter. He doesn't need to keep Pesach Sheni. He can carry on keeping Pesach normally. Where do we get this from? This halacha is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, as the Gemara says in our Gemara and in Psochim. Ela tumat tehom Gemara Gemirila. This is halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Don't try and figure it out logically. It isn't extracted and extrapolated from psukim. We've got psukim that support it, but it doesn't come from psukim. This is a Mesorah that was given to Hashem, to Moshe on Sinai, that in this particular case, a Nazir, after shaving and bringing his korban, discovers that he was Tomei with Tumat Tehom, with this mysterious Tumah a week ago, or a month, or 2 weeks ago, whenever, doesn't have to undo his Nazirut. That's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. If we look carefully in the words of Rashi, there's a difference between Rashi and Tosfos here. And we're going to focus on the view of Tosfos because that's the way the Rambam goes. But if you look carefully in Rashi, you'll see that Rashi in Psochim says, B'tumat atahom, b'tumat safek, kidem mefarish b'Gemara. Rashi learns that tumat tehom is to some degree a tumah of safek. We're not 100% sure about it. And that's the halacha l'Moshe Misinai. And again, he gives in the case that our Gemara and Psochim brings, of you find a dead body buried under hay, bales of hay, and under the hay there's a dead body, that's tumat tehom, because Rashi says, Shema gala vanimu afar otev nafal alav, maybe a pile of stones fell on him, there was an earthquake or whatever, or a lot of hay fell on him, and he died under this stack of hay. Nobody even knew that where he's gone. He disappeared. Nobody knew where he was. But look at the word Rashi uses again, Shema. Perhaps nobody knows. So according to Rashi, it's enough to be able to say, it's possible that nobody knows about this dead body. If there's a possibility that somebody knows about the dead body, then it wouldn't be tumat tehom. But if it's possible that nobody knows, he doesn't say it's impossible that anybody knows. He says if it's possible that nobody knows. But Tosfos is different. Tosfos says, Mishum delefi ma shemitzaunu achshav, based on how we just discovered this dead body. So now the Nazir comes and now we've discovered this dead body. But we say about this dead body, until this moment, nobody in the world could have known about it. It's just been discovered now. We can assume that it wasn't fit, it wasn't possible for anybody to know about that. So Tosfos is not learning it as a Shema, he's learning it as, it's a chazaka, you've got to assume that nobody could have known about it. So this forms part of that body of information which is not knowledge. Knowledge is what humanity knows. Information is a real fact, but at that time, humanity doesn't know. So at the time the Nazir was exposed to the dead body, it was a dead body. And so to say, scientifically, objectively, it should cause tumah. There was a dead body, and he was in contact with a dead body. But at the time, nobody, not only he, nobody in the world knew there was a dead body there. And when does he discover when he's no longer a Nazir? So what do we see from here? That if he would have discovered while he was a Nazir, he would have been Tomei. So if information becomes knowledge at a moment where it still has relevance, then now it's knowledge, now it has halachic relevance. You've got a Nazir, and he stumbles on this body, and until now nobody knew, but now he stumbled on the body, and we discover the body, even if we discover later on, but at that point he's still a Nazir, so now human knowledge determines halacha. What we're seeing over here is fact doesn't determine halacha. Human knowledge determines halacha. Fact doesn't determine halacha, human knowledge determines halacha. So this became human knowledge while he was a Nazir. So then now his Tameh is going to start again. But if it became human knowledge after he was finished his Nazirut, then since at the time he was a Nazir it wasn't human knowledge, it doesn't have halachic relevance, we don't have to take account of it. So that's the important principle we learn out of here. It's an amazing thing. We're learning something which seems to be so irrelevant. But the principle that we're learning here is halacha deals with human knowledge, not with fact. If there's fact that isn't part of the body of human knowledge, then we don't have to consider it in halacha. And the Rambam's very clearly like Tosfos as well. The Rambam on the Pesha Mishnah says, "Tumat haTehom hi haTumah hane'elemet she'ena yudu'a klal." This is tumah which is not known at all. Nobody knows. She'ein shum adam yodea sheyesh bo'oto hamakom meit v'shu makom tumah ad asher nitma ze b'li da'ato. Until this moment, nobody in the entire world knew that there was tumah there. So you see the Rambam clearly going like Tosfos, not like Rashi. This is not about a sofek and maybe, and there might be nobody. No, there is nobody. Nobody could have known about this. That's tumat tehom. And then he goes on, and if you look further down, 4 lines from the bottom of the Rambam, Hinei nitba'eh lecha b'makom zeh inyan shira'ui she'zachur b'datcha tamid. Says the Rambam, I'll tell you something now that you should never forget. That's how important the sugi is. V'hu she'metza'anu et hamet b'matzav sheyesh lahaniach bekach shelo yada bo shum adam shu b'oto hamakom harei yotzenu b'mala tumat haTehom. If we find a dead body where we may assume that nobody could have known about it, that is tumat tehom. But if there's a way that somebody might have known about it, that is no longer tumat tehom, says the Rambam. And he paskins that lahaloche in Hilchos Nazirus in Perek Vov. We're talking about a fact that nobody could know about this. This then falls into the category of fact, not of human knowledge, and therefore it has no halachic relevance. So if we want to take this one step further and say, to see how far this goes, the Ben Ish Chai has an amazing tshuva. The Ben Ish Chai from Baghdad and spent a time in Damascus as well, died in the beginning of the 20th century, one of the great tzaddikim and go'onim of the Sephardi world, and one of the important poskim in the Sephardi world. I've brought him before several times. Once I mentioned to you, and I don't remember who it was who said it, I'll try and find it, but I don't remember now, that if you saw the face of the Ben Ish Chai, you knew what Adam looked like before the sin. That's the level of tzidkus of the Ben Ish Chai. And he wrote a huge sefer of Shailos Utshuvas called the Torah Lishma. And it's called Torah Lishma because he writes it anonymously. He actually writes it under a pseudonym. And it was first published only in 1966 by the Kaduri family. The Kaduris are from Baghdad, and they're actually descendants of the Ben Ish Chai. In 1966 was the first time that Torah Lishma was published. And in Torah Lishma, and Siman Shin Pei, he has the question of what about if Eliyahu Hanavi knows? At a moment that Eliyahu appears physically, because we know Eliyahu appears physically. So if Eliyahu comes in physical form and says, I tell you there's a dead body there, and later we find there was a dead body there and the Nazir was there, but Eliyahu knew about it. Is that called tumat tehom or isn't it? Asks the Ben Ish Chai. And the Ben Ish Chai proves from our Gemara that when Eliyahu Hanavi is dressed up like a human, he's not a human. And his knowledge does not put knowledge into the category of human knowledge, because he's not considered a human. So, and he says, "Ha'olam yikir ba'echad besof ha'olam en ze tumat tehom v'hi halacha psuka la'alocha v'nei Eliyahu Hanavi zachur lato v'adai hu makir ba v'im nechshav bichlal b'nei adam." If Eliyahu Hanavi is considered a human being, liyoto mulubash beguf, when he's in physical form, im kein biyoto b'olam hazeh leka tumat tehom. In that case, when Eliyahu Hanavi is present, there would be no case of tumat tehom, because somebody recognizes him. Therefore, Eliyahu Hanavi, even if you see him physically, and he takes the form of a living human being, he has the din of a malach, he doesn't have the din of a human being. is what the Ben Ish Chai comes to the conclusion based on this Gemara that's it. So there again, saying, okay, so we've got these two bodies of knowledge. There's human fact, there's human knowledge, and there's fact, which is a greater body of knowledge than human knowledge. What about a piece of information that Eliyahu Hanavi knows, but no other human being knows? And Eliyahu Hanavi comes and is physically present and it gives us that knowledge. Do we have to consider that part of the category of human knowledge, or is that part of the category of fact, which is not human knowledge? Paskin's the Ben Ish Chai, that's a part of the category of fact, but it's not human knowledge, and therefore we don't have to take halakhic cognizance of what Eliyahu Hanavi references in that sense.